Right now, Houthi forces in Yemen are closing shipping lanes through Bab el-Mandeb. They just struck Saudi Arabia with missiles, and headlines everywhere are describing it the same way. Iran is flexing its proxy network. Tehran pulled a lever, and half the Middle East moved. That explanation is comforting. It's also probably wrong. Because if you actually look at how Iran built this network, Hezbollah, Iraqi militias, the Houthis, you find something the headlines keep missing. The most dangerous thing about Iran's so-called proxy empire isn't that Tehran controls it. It's that Tehran can't. And once you understand why, you'll never read another "Iran orders its proxies" headline the same way again. Start with what actually got built here, because it wasn't built overnight, and it wasn't built as a single organization. Hezbollah goes back to the early 1980s, a militia formed with direct Iranian Revolutionary Guard support during Israel's occupation of Lebanon. Iraq's Shia militias, Kataib Hezbollah, Asaib al-Haq, emerged after 2003, forged in the chaos of American occupation and Iranian opportunism. The Houthis are older still as a movement, rooted in Yemen's own Zaidi religious identity, and only became an Iranian partner later as the Yemeni civil war escalated. 3 organizations, 3 different origins, 3 different countries, built across 4 decades, not deployed on command. Here's why that matters. Every one of these relationships exists because Iran cannot achieve its regional objectives directly. Tehran cannot bomb Israel without inviting devastating retaliation. It cannot invade Saudi Arabia. It cannot fight the United States in the Persian Gulf and expect to survive the exchange. So instead, Iran does what great powers have done for a century when direct confrontation is too costly. It delegates the fighting to someone else. That's the sponsor's bargain in a single sentence. You get influence, deniability, and the ability to impose costs on your enemies, without your own soldiers dying and without your own capital getting bombed. It's the same logic that put American weapons in Afghan hands to bleed the Soviets in the 1980s. It's the same logic behind Saudi support for factions in Yemen, Russian support for separatists in Ukraine's east before the full invasion. Delegate the violence, keep the deniability, avoid the war you can't win directly. But here's what the bargain doesn't include: obedience, and that's the crisis nobody's covering. To understand what's actually happening in the Middle East right now, you need to stop thinking of Iran's proxies as one thing. They sit on a spectrum, and where each one sits on that spectrum determines how much control Tehran actually has. At one end, Hezbollah. This is as close to genuine command and control as proxy warfare gets. Iranian Revolutionary Guard officers helped build Hezbollah's command structure. Shia religious identity binds Tehran and Hezbollah's Lebanese base together in a way that goes beyond a transactional exchange of weapons for loyalty. Hezbollah fighters deployed into Syria specifically to prop up Iran's ally Assad, a decision that exposed them to casualties they wouldn't have taken on purely for Lebanese domestic reasons. That's what deep integration looks like. It's also expensive. It's why an Israeli strike could kill an Iranian general standing on Iraqi soil. Because deep integration means Iranian personnel show up in places direct war was supposed to keep them out of. Move down the spectrum. Iraq's Shia militias. Real Iranian training, real Iranian funding, real coordination, but a shallower, more transactional relationship than Hezbollah's. These groups fight for Iranian-aligned objectives when it serves them, and for local Iraqi power struggles when it doesn't. Less ideological cement, more room to drift. Now go to the far end, the Houthis. And this is where the entire Iran controls its proxies narrative falls apart. The Houthis are fighting a war that predates their Iranian relationship by years. A fight over power sharing and Zaidi political representation inside Yemen. Iranian weapons and missile technology matter to their capability. But Houthi objectives were never primarily about serving Tehran's regional strategy. They were and remain about Yemen. Iran gets a useful side effect. a group that can threaten Saudi territory and international shipping lanes at minimal Iranian cost. But useful side effect is not the same thing as command. This is the Control-Autonomy Dilemma, and it's the single most important concept for understanding proxy warfare anywhere in the world. A sponsor needs its proxy to be effective, which means giving it enough independence to fight on its own terms, read local conditions, and make decisions faster than any foreign patron could authorize from a distance. But that same independence is exactly what allows the proxy to pursue its own agenda, escalate when the sponsor wants restraint, or stay quiet when the sponsor wants pressure applied. You cannot have a proxy that's both fully obedient and fully effective. Every sponsor in history has had to choose which failure mode they can live with. So here's the reframe. When the Houthis close a shipping lane or strike Saudi Arabia, the automatic assumption is Iran ordered it. But look at the actual incentive structure, and a different explanation emerges, one that's more unsettling, not less. The Houthis may be escalating for their own reasons. Demonstrating that they can threaten Saudi Arabia and disrupt global shipping cements their domestic legitimacy inside Yemen. It signals to rivals inside their own coalition that they're the ones capable of standing up to the Saudis and the Americans. And it does all of this while Iran absorbs almost none of the direct cost and gets to claim, with a straight face, that its resistance network is holding the line, regardless of whether Tehran actually authorized the operation. This is entrapment, and it runs in a direction most coverage completely misses. It's not just that sponsors drag proxies into wars. Proxies drag sponsors too. Once a Houthi strike forces a Saudi or American response, Iran faces an impossible choice: back its proxy publicly and risk deeper confrontation it never wanted, or stay silent and look like it doesn't control its own network, which is arguably the more dangerous admission of the two. And this is exactly the trap that killed Qasem Soleimani. Deep integration with proxies doesn't just create capability, it creates exposure. The closer Iran gets to directly commanding a fight, the more Iranian personnel and Iranian credibility end up standing directly in the blast radius. So when you see a headline that says Iran orders proxies to escalate, ask a different question. Which proxy, on which end of the spectrum, and whose objective is actually being served here? Because half the time, the answer isn't Tehran's grand strategy unfolding on schedule. It's a local actor pursuing local survival, wearing the label of somebody else's foreign policy. Here's what to carry away from this, because it applies far beyond Iran. Every proxy relationship in modern history runs into this same wall. The United States discovered it in Afghanistan in the 1980s. When weapons meant to bleed, the Soviets ended up in the hands of factions that would later become the Taliban. Pakistan discovered it when the Afghan groups it armed to project influence eventually turned against Pakistani interests. Saudi Arabia is discovering it right now in Yemen. The pattern doesn't change because the sponsor changes. Control and effectiveness sit on opposite ends of a seesaw, and no amount of funding, training, or diplomatic pressure lets a sponsor have both at once. That means the next time a proxy conflict escalates anywhere, Yemen, Lebanon, Ukraine, Taiwan, the right question isn't what does the sponsor want. It's what does the sponsor want, what does the proxy want, and where do those two things stop lining up? Because that gap is where wars actually escalate. Not through central command, through drift. Understanding that gap is the difference between reading headlines and understanding the mechanism underneath them. And that mechanism, the Control-Autonomy Dilemma, the entrapment dynamic, the reasons proxy wars persist, even when every rational actor involved would benefit from stopping, is exactly what I built out across the full argument in Proxy Wars. If this episode raised more questions than it answered about how sponsors lose control of the wars they start, that book walks through the entire framework in depth, including the historical cases, Afghanistan, Angola, the Cold War proxy playbook, that show this pattern isn't new. It's structural. I'll leave the link in the description.